I'm a professional journalist. I worked for a number of news organizations, the longest of which was the Providence Journal for 35 years. I worked for United Press International, which is a news service, and the Springfield, Massachusetts Union. Since 2001, I've been a freelance reporter. I've written a couple of histories of hospitals in Rhode Island, and I have written for the Providence Phoenix, an alternative newspaper, and done some work for public radio. The Rhode Island Library Report is a startup news organization that hopes to provide state-of-the-art, multi-dimensional news reports that will focus strongly on Rhode Island libraries and therefore increase public awareness and support for libraries, as only sort of concentrated journalism can do. It came about really sort of in a very casual way. After I had written a history of Miriam Hospital, I was meeting with some academic librarians to see if we could provide copies of the Miriam Hospital history to their libraries. And as we were talking, myself and other librarians, one of them said, half joking, why not do a history of libraries in Rhode Island? Libraries are really under the gun and they need a lot of attention. And I thought about that after that meeting, and almost instantly thought, why stop at histories, which is an important component, but why not do the whole ball of wax about libraries? Why not do the future as well as the present of libraries? Because they are so important. And I think I drove immediately from that meeting to the home in Providence of two friends, Jody McPhillips and Dave Bloss, who were, like myself, former Providence Journal editors and reporters, and told them the idea. And we all agreed right on the spot that this was something we thought really could happen. We almost made an immediate connection with the plight that libraries are finding themselves in now, and we saw some real parallels between what was happening to the newspaper business as well as what was happening to libraries. And in doing that, it was bad enough to lose the enormous news gathering and public service functions of a newspaper. But if libraries closed, we felt, and right away, that would be the loss of one of the great portals of information. And democracy really would be threatened. If you see libraries becoming marginalized, then you lose that sort of doorway to information that is so important in this information age. And so we thought that if we took what we knew about journalism and really made it into a state-of-the-art organization, that we could, in a period of a couple of years, focus Rhode Island's attention on its libraries, and it would have a twofold result, which good journalism always produces. One is the public would understand a lot more about what libraries are doing and their importance. And what would follow from that would be an increase in public support for the funding of libraries. We met with a lot of different library organizations, and one of them was the State Office of Library and Information Services, who were in close contact with, in particular, Renee Hobbs, who was the founding director of the Harrington School. So the chief state librarian, Howard Buxenbaum, as we told him what we were up to, number one, was very enthusiastic about what we were doing, and two, thought that Renee Hobbs also would be, because under her as the founding director of the Harrington School, under her purview were both journalism and library sciences departments. And he arranged a meeting with Renee Hobbs and the library report organizational team, and that's how we got to be talking. And we had a number of conversations with Director Hobbs, and there were some discussions that are still ongoing as to whether we could have a cooperative arrangement with the Harrington School. It turned out that we didn't have the original idea that there might be some sort of synergies between libraries and newspapers. There was a conference that Jody McPhillips and Dave Bloss, who are married by the way, went to in Marlborough, and it was sponsored by the library people in Massachusetts and the journalism people, and they were discussing the intersection of libraries and journalism, which we thought we had sort of invented this idea, but some other people had thought it up earlier, and this conference sort of discussed that. And it was really coming from the library point of view, where in certain communities in Massachusetts, journalism had died out completely, and there was no weekly, there was no daily newspaper, there was no coverage of and libraries were starting to think that maybe they had some responsibility to not only be the repositories of information, but maybe to generate some of it and to facilitate in some manner some form of journalism to fill the void that had been left by the departure of newspapers. Heading up that conference, or facilitating it, was a man named Bill Densmore, who was working with Renee Hobbs already in terms of addressing these issues of the synergies between libraries and journalism. It wasn't completely clear as to what our relationship would be to the library community, and it still isn't. Traditionally journalists have tried to stand apart a little from the communities that they cover, not because they think they're uppity, they know more, or they don't like to hobnob, but there is an inherent conflict of interest in being too friendly or too close or too financially intertwined with the people and the institutions that you cover. Journalists are meant to be not popular, but to be respected, and to be able to, as much as anybody can, to be fair and objective in their reporting. And they are the only ones really in our society that don't have a stake in the outcome of something. So we start out with a premise that libraries are a public good, and we want them to succeed. But then that's where we drop it in terms of our advocacy. What we don't see ourselves is writing slanted articles or pro-library articles or being the public relations, mouthpiece for the state's libraries. What we think is that by giving fair, robust, state-of-the-art coverage to the library community, that is our service to it. But we're not taking sides in the various issues of this library versus that library, or how libraries are organized in Rhode Island or funded. We're not going to appear before the Senate Finance Committee at the State House and argue that the library budget should be increased. What we will do is cover that hearing and give the public a good understanding of what the debate is. We have two goals. One is to create a state-of-the-art news operation that is second to none in its professionalism, the delivery of its services, its innovative initiatives, and its ability to deliver multimedia reports in every platform that we can think of. So if we're able to really get up and running, we will be a model journalism effort that will be breathtaking in its ability to do what journalism needs to do in the 21st century. That will be technically savvy, that our reporting will be just as good as it can get, and we will be a trusted and valued part of the Rhode Island landscape in terms of our demonstration of journalism skill. The other goal is that if we are able to do all of that we want in terms of reporting about libraries, the understanding and appreciation of libraries will rise substantially. Not only within the library community that already has great love and regard for libraries, but in the sort of less interested public that may have thought libraries have passed their time in society, and they'll come to a new realization of all of the potential and service that a library provides, and that understanding will lead to community demand that tax money especially be maintained or increased to keep libraries going in the 21st century. We had on the library end sort of a three-part mission that we saw, or areas of interest. One was the history end of the library situation in Rhode Island, which was the original idea that college librarians had suggested to us. And we thought of the history end of our things being very important, because all news depends on what was. And you can't understand what you are in the present or where you want to go in the future if you don't understand where you've been and where you've come from. And we thought that we would be facilitators, certainly, of really good library histories. Some libraries have their own histories and they've been done very well, others don't. And we thought that we could work with libraries to organize their history writing. This is one area where we thought we could come in as mentors, and if there were people within the library system, specifically patrons that had great interest in libraries, that working with the library staffs and us, they could produce a history of each library in Rhode Island, and then we could form some sort of team to write a all Rhode Island history. The second was the present, and obviously that's our bread and butter as journalists, but we would, in every way possible, cover the entire spectrum of what libraries are doing at the current time. And if we could bring live cameras into library meetings, whether they be the administrative meetings of boards of trustees, or whether they be programs that are running at the libraries, or documentary type of things to say what's going on. Could we write traditional news stories? Could we do radio stories with the library, about people who are using the libraries, what they're doing? But in every way that we could, from storytelling to live broadcasts to collecting scholarly reports about what was going on in the library, but just to show the enormous present-day activity of library. And the third component was the future. So what we wanted to do was, could we, as journalists, not only write about what libraries were looking at as they were trying to chart their futures, but could we be conveners or catalysts of discussions that would facilitate that? Could we sponsor forums and invite, using our journalistic backgrounds, could we help that process along by facilitating discussions, by writing about new technology, by helping to think out what the future was. So that's the threefold mission. And that, let's say that we really got to be the kind of news organization that we wanted to be, just as good as you could get, we'd give ourselves 1 year or 2 years to see if it worked. And if it did work, and by working, meaning somehow that there was more attention focused on libraries than there ever had been, and that people really responded to that, and you could sort of tell by how much traffic our website was getting and how much more interest that the libraries were getting, and then seeing what happened to town and city councils and to the state general assembly, is whether they were, whether they were paying attention to any of this in terms of how they regarded the library stuff. And I should say that one of our plans on this was that even though we thought that what you might call legacy media, old-fashioned, dying, media, like newspapers, but not quite dead, whether we could partner with some of our old media colleagues in the old way of delivering media. By this I mean weekly newspapers, the Providence Journal, radio stations, TV stations, anything that moves on the internet or on traditional media, and whether if we had sufficient robust funding, whether we could offer our product free to any media that would take it on the condition that they A, give us credit, and B, not alter or distort the content of what we were doing. But if we could partner with them and maybe co-produce some of our materials, in that way we would be getting more information out about libraries. So if all of that worked, if we had this crackerjack news operation and that it had proved itself that it could really highlight an interest in libraries and raise that to a high level of interest among the public, that if there was another subject that needed treatment in Rhode Island that was being undercovered, then maybe we could open phase 2 of the library report. And so our core organization actually isn't called the Rhode Island Library Report. It's an organization that we're calling the Public Square, and the Public Square would be the sponsor of the Rhode Island Library Report, and then if the library report proved itself, maybe take that model and use it on some other area. So is healthcare being adequately covered by the dying media? Is science? Is some other aspect of society, education, some other vital component that just isn't getting enough stuff? Would it be crime reporting? I don't know. But could we then focus in the same way with project number 2? So the twofold goals were to save journalism and save libraries.